Uh, this is a pretty intimate group again tonight, so just get started. Tonight is the public information session on the town hall renovation and potential town hall renovation. Just for some background, um, I think it was around 2008 that the discussion on a new town hall had begun. The township had purchased the Rimback building, which is now currently Lot 19, in the hopes of tearing that down and creating a space for a potential new town hall. It became a surface parking lot and has remained that way since. Um, and I think some combination of things occurred in which the redevelopment plan that was being presented at that time did not advance, as well as 2008 was the housing market issues. Um, and the conversation about a new town hall sort of um, went away and hadn't been spoken about for some time. And there was a little bit of new life breathed into it by former committees to with the potential to either build a new town hall or um, perhaps renovate the current town hall. This town hall is, to my knowledge, was built in 1906 or somewhere thereabouts. It was the original town hall, police department, fire department, and has been expanded over the years. And I know Eli Goldstein, who is the architect on this, we'll get into that in a little bit more in depth. But there was a point in the conversation that what we really needed to know, because we had at times attempted to renovate the bathroom or renovate, a particular room, and it started to become somewhat cost ineffective in terms of cost. I think we were going to make the bathrooms ADA accessible, and it was going to run us about $100,000 for that. That was the bids that we received. We rejected the bids, and we didn't go through with the project. And so we thought that perhaps a more holistic approach would be better. Had a conversation with the committee in 2022 about whether we're going to stay or we're going to go, which was a really important, I think, decision point to say, are we going to continue to put money into this building if we're going to have a new building, or should we be looking at something that's more of a holistic approach to renovating town hall? I think the sentiment at that time, and obviously this changes, or can change from year to year, but at that time was to stay in this building, the original town hall, and do a full scale renovation of the building. At that point, we went out to RFP for architectural services to come up with a plan, an idea, um, sit down and meet with staff and go through what the needs and the constraints and different things were of this particular building. We selected Eli Goldstein's firm, the Goldstein Partnership, who has a wealth of knowledge and experience in municipal buildings. And I don't know that he's going to go through all that today, but certainly has done a lot of buildings for municipalities throughout the state, including the Maplewood Police Department, which is probably the closest to us here. And so we spent a good amount of time in 2023 going through the current layout, the history of the building, what it's composed of. We found out that there's no insulation in town hall. We found out a lot of things about the building that we've been occupying for the better part of 115 years. So the exercise was great, quite honestly, and understanding what we needed currently, but also what we may need in the future. One of the biggest constraints that this building has, besides room wise, is that there's only one conference room. We juggle the back conference room all the time for various different meetings and things like that. And so it was a great exercise in going through our current needs and what it is that we may need in the future. So with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Eli, who has a presentation that he's going to do. As this is a fairly small and intimate group, I'll leave it to Eli whether he's willing to take questions mid presentation. But there's a lot of good information in here. It talks about our process, talks about the needs, why we even embarked upon this, and what this might look like going down the road. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eli Goldstein, who will do the presentation. Thanks, Eli.
Thank you, Alex. And thanks for all of you who come here and spend your time tonight to hear about the project. So, first slide, please. All right, next slide. Okay, so I'm sure you're all familiar with downtown Melbourne, but just to make sure you understand in terms of the buildings, right now, of course, we're sitting in Town Hall, and there's a small building behind, which we'll refer to as the alarm building. It's used for the fire department for some storage, and that's where the food pantry is currently. Here's the parking lot on the east side of the building, and then across Municipal Plaza, you have the larger parking lot. Melbourne Avenue at the bottom, Essex Street along the back. Next, please. All right, so the first thing we did when we started work on the project was we needed to understand the building, because there were very few records of the detailed records about the construction of the building. So a colleague of ours with a very sophisticated scanning system scanned the inside and the outside of this building, and these models were created from the scans in tremendous detail of what's here, including the basement. Now, the basement of this building is very odd because it was built in different stages, like the rest of the building, which I'll get to in a minute. Among other things, there's an abandoned firing range in the basement from when it was a police department. But the basement isn't under the whole building. It's under portions of the building. Next, please. All right, so the building was built in 3 stages. The front portion along Melbourne Avenue was built in the late 1800s as the fire department, and the arched openings in the front are where the apparatus would come out onto the street. Then in the early 1900s, 2 wings were added, here and here, when it became the police department, and that's when they built the firing range, which is underneath this portion. And then in about the 1950s, this portion was infilled between the 2 arms of the U. Now, not only was it built in different stages, but it was built in different sort of mixes of materials. So a portion of the original building, much of the original building was wood framed, including the roof structure. Then the more recent addition in the middle has some structural steel in it. So it's a real hodgepodge of building systems. Next, please. This is a view of the west elevation. And you can see where this was the original building, and this was the first addition. And you can see also that the brick colors are slightly different. The brick patterns are slightly different because they were built at different times. Next. All right, so as Alex mentioned, our charge was to take a very holistic view as we did our work. And this is really sort of as holistic as you can get, I guess. So these are not necessarily in the order of priority. We were asked to make sure the building would be functional. So for that, we interviewed all the department heads and spent a lot of time after interviewing them with sketches to make sure that we met their requirements. We also wanted to make sure the building was adaptable going forward. so that as time passes, it can accommodate changes. The building's already, portions of the building are already 125 years old. We want to make sure that you get a lot more use out of it. Accessibility was key because the building as a public building, needs to be in full compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so accessibility is not just the entrances, as Alex mentioned, it's also the bathrooms, it's also the elevator. Just having an elevator by itself doesn't necessarily mean you have access. Depends on how big the elevator is, the elevator controls. And then there's things like the dais in the courtroom to make sure that someone in a wheelchair can get up to the dais. We want to make sure the building is secure. So in the current building, the public can go pretty much anywhere. And as we spoke to department heads, we got the strong sense that for a variety of reasons, it would be desirable to have portions of the building where the public could go and portions of the building where the public couldn't go, so that workers could continue their work without interruption, and also for security. We wanted to make sure the building was legible, meaning that when visitors came, they could figure out where they are and where they need to go to transact the business that they're there for. Code compliant. So New Jersey, unlike most other states, has two different types of building codes. They have a building code for new construction, and they have a building code for renovations and additions. And so, because this involves an existing building, we're following the second type of building code, which has all sorts of special provisions. And depending on the type of work you do or plan to do in a building, it may trigger certain life safety upgrades. So for example, as part of this project, one of the things that was triggered is that we will have to put a sprinkler system into the building, fire sprinklers. And so these are the sorts of things that we had to analyze as we went through our work. Flood resistance. Now, you may not realize this, but this building is in the floodplain. And bless you. And the basement has suffered a lot of water damage. And so one of the questions was, what do we do about that? And I'll get to that in a little bit. We want to make sure the building would be comfortable not just in terms of having offices for those people who need it, an adequate workspace, but also that the air conditioning and heating systems were good. The ones that are in the building right now are very poor and are on the end of their useful lives. So that was part of the analysis as well. Fire resistant. So this gets back to the sprinkler system we're putting in, and also to make sure that in terms of egress, there'll be safe ways out of the building in a fire. Free of environmental contamination. So the township hired an environmental consultant who did detailed analyses of the building and found that there is asbestos in here, and in the basement where the firing range was, there is some lead contamination. So that's all part of this whole picture, this holistic approach. As Alex mentioned, able to accommodate multiple meetings of various sizes simultaneously. That's one of the most important programmatic requirements that we identified in our work. Then there's also the historic nature of the building. And so one of my staff members who specializes in historic preservation met with the head of your environmental commission, or historic preservation commission, who said that the most important thing was to try to keep some of the original fabric of the building, such as the hose tower that's in the back. And then to explore the feasibility of incorporating into the building, the redesigned building, the municipal court, which is currently across the street at the police department, both to make it more easier for the public and also to free up some space at the police department. Next. And so to get to this point, and I'm sorry for these long lists, but you really need to understand the background here. So we arranged for the site to be surveyed. So we had an accurate current survey of the property. We had the building scanned, as I mentioned, so we had an accurate record of what the building is like. We met with representatives of the Department of Environment and Protection in New Jersey to discuss the flood elevations. And about 6 months ago, we submitted a filing to them to have them to confirm the flood elevation at the site. And just last week, they confirmed that we were correct and that that's the one we can use. We had the water company perform a flow test in the street, the water main in the street, to make sure that there's adequate pressure to run the sprinkler system that we're going to need in the building. So it goes on, and I won't bore you with all of it, but you can see we went through a lot of different things to make sure we understood the building and all the things that would be triggered by what we were considering. But what I do want to mention here is LEED credits. So are all of you familiar with the concept of green buildings? Okay, so there's an international rating system called LEED, which rates green buildings. It's one of several such systems. And when we did the Maplewood Courthouse, that's on Springfield Avenue, just a couple of miles up the road, that was the first green public building in New Jersey, LEED Silver. And Milburn also wants buildings to be LEED certified. And so as part of our whole design process, simultaneously, we had to figure out how we were going to meet the requirements to achieve LEED in order to conform with the township's ordinance. All right, next, please. So among the inaccessible, and when I say inaccessible, I mean not accessible in compliance with the ADA aspects of the building, are the bathrooms, the elevator, the basement, the entrances. I mean, it's all over the place. And so this was sort of in the back of our minds throughout all of our planning to make sure that every aspect of the building would meet the ADA. Next. And so as Alex mentioned, we had the DPW cut some holes in the exterior wall of the building so we could see inside, and we confirmed that there is no insulation in the exterior walls, which is one of the reasons why it's so uncomfortable here in the middle of the summer and in the middle of the winter, because no matter how much warm or cold air you blow into this building, the exterior walls are going to be like a sieve for energy. It's contaminated, the basement floods, the stairs are very steep, and the HVAC systems are sort of on their last legs. Next. So these are the plans of the existing building based on the scans that we had made, and we've color coded them by department. So for example, here's where we're sitting right now. Oops. And finance, for instance, is here. And recreation is there. And anyway, it goes through and you can see, whoops, go back one. Yep. I'm sorry, go back. Back. There we go. One of the things we noticed when we put the color coding was, which we sensed already, was that one of the reasons why it's so hard for the staff to work in the building right now is that many of the departments are distributed. Instead of having an area where like this is the building department and this is the administration, you've got administration in different corners and different floors, you've got people upstairs and downstairs. And it's sort of not surprising because there hasn't been enough space. And so it's been like an ad hoc improvisation when new needs come up to figure out where people are going to go. And so part of our project, part of our goal was to reorganize it so that each department would have a home, and it would make sense in terms of not only internally within the department, but also in terms of which department is next to which other departments. Next slide, please. So this is the color coding of what we're proposing. So this is the area of the existing building. And this at the top is a proposed addition, 2 stories out towards the north, towards Essex Street. And you can see by the colors that we're trying to cluster things. So we've got building, zoning, and engineering in this cluster on the first floor, with the offices here facing out through the arched openings that were originally the firehouse bays, and then a large workroom with a public counter for the transacting business with the public. Then we've got the violations bureau coming over from the police department. We've got it here. We've taken the meeting room out of this building and moved it and created a whole new meeting room in the addition in order to free up room in this building. So the original building becomes basically all offices. And then the meetings take place back there, partly so that they can take place back there without opening up the rest of the building. So for instance, in the future, if there were a meeting like this, the rest of the building would be locked off. You wouldn't have to come up through the rest of the building. You'd be on the first floor, you'd come in here, you go right to the meeting room. And there would be bathrooms and so on here. And even when it's court session, this would be the courtroom then, violations bureau is here. So the idea of creating zoning within the building so that you can turn off all the air conditioning heating in this building at night and just open that part when you need it. So I won't go through all the different departments, but the plans are here if you want to look at them later. And you can see how we've clustered things. In addition, we've completely reorganized the vertical circulation. So we're getting rid of the existing elevator. We're putting a new elevator in, larger one. We're opening up these as entrances off of Milburn Avenue. We're keeping the entrance from the east, and we're creating a new entrance on the west. And then we're creating separate circulation networks within the building so that the staff can get around in the building separate from the public, and we'll get to that in a minute. If anyone has any questions as we're going, feel free to ask. Next slide. So here are the plans without color coding. Next. All right, so these are the circulation plans, which are also up here. And you can see that basically we have like a U-shaped circulation within the existing building. And then we have a connection to a new lobby. This is now the main lobby, it'll be in the addition. And because of the fact that the street rises up slightly, there are going to be stairs, a few stairs and a ramp connecting the existing first floor to the first floor of the addition. Because the grades there. And also because of the flood elevation, we have to build any new construction has to be a little higher than the existing building. Next slide. All right, so during the day in the future, the public will have access around here and into here. And then onto the second floor, the public will only get up into here. Then, next slide. At night, it's a little hard to see here. Colors got washed out. But at night, this will all be locked off and the public will be limited to just this area. That's it.
Is the clerk's office going to be on the first or second floor?
The clerk is on the second floor.
Right. So it's staying on the second floor.
Yeah, right on the top of the stair. Next slide, please. And then these are preliminary furniture plans. You can see we have a big workroom. In general, the basic idea was for major departments like building and zoning, we've got a workroom and then where needed, private staff offices. This is the clerk's office. We've got workstations and the clerk's office. And then the administrative suite is here. Finance, we have the finance director, finance workstation. Recreation, we have the recreation work area and the recreation office. Violations, we have the violations work area and a clerk, the court administrator and judge's office. That's the basic pattern. Next slide, please. And then we assign some preliminary types of flooring here as part of the exercise to get a price, an estimate of the cost of the work. Next. And then we compared, these are the existing square footages for each of the major departments and the proposed, and you can see that consistent with the idea of creating conference rooms, a huge increase in the amount of space that's shared between departments, like conference rooms. That's the biggest change. All these other differences, 30% more, 20% less, and so on, minor changes. But this one is the big change. I'm sorry?
What is that one in red?
Shared spaces like conference rooms. Can you go back one slide? So I didn't really talk about conference rooms very much, but I should. So Obviously, this is the biggest shared space. This is the meeting room, courtroom, which will be used also for zoning board and so on. But we've also created conference rooms on both sides of the first floor and also on the second floor, so that there'll be conference rooms very close to every department. And they're out in the public area so that the public can use them when they're not reserved for particular departmental meetings.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Will there be like built-in screens? So like right now, I can't really see anything you're showing.
Yeah.
So like, will there be like big built-in,
There'll be screens, yeah, there'll be screens like this. Yeah.
bigger?
Well, depending on the size of the room, this will have very big screens.
Okay.
All right, next, please.
More than one.
I was gonna say multiple screens,
Right.
yeah. So on
Next.
the left, those on the right.
Okay,
Not
so now-
vertically.
now the site plan. So this blue line represents the extent of the existing property. So here's Town Hall. Here's that, what we call the alarm building. Milburn Avenue. And there's this funny dog leg back here where the street comes in, you all know that, I'm sure, off of Essex Street. And so our goal was to figure out how to do this as simply as possible. Next slide, please. So here's the plan. Here's the existing plan, the existing building and the alarm building. And so what we're proposing to do is to demolish the alarm building. The next slide. This is the plan showing the addition. And we get fairly close to the rear property line, but it doesn't require taking any property to do this. Next slide. And so if we zoom in on the portion of the site plan showing the building, you can see that we're reopening the entrances from Milburn Avenue, keeping this, adding this, and then this will be the staff entrance at the north.
I got two questions. The large meeting room.
Yeah.
That's going to be for the municipal court as well as the various board meetings. Are there enough nights in the week? for that to
That's a scheduling issue. That's beyond my jurisdiction.
work? So, I just want to make sure. And the other question, like on this floor here currently, does this end up getting gutted, this whole floor?
The whole building gets cut.
Okay.
All right, next. All right, so this is the existing west elevation, which we saw before. Next slide. And this is what we're proposing to add. So this would be the entrance from the west. And this is the outside of the proposed meeting. And the reason why we did this, next slide, please. The reason why we did it this way is that this is facing west. So the west sun is very intense, very bright and low in the sky, particularly in the late fall and winter. So we wanted to make sure that you didn't get direct sun interfering with the use of that room, but we wanted to make sure to get a lot of daylight in the room. In addition, because of security issues, next slide, please. This is a rendering of what the inside might look like, looking north, with this being the bench for the council and the committee and the judge. The state court system has a series of requirements for the courtroom. One of them is that there be no way for someone outside the room to be able to look in and shoot at the judge. And so we wanted to make sure that no one could look in any of these windows and see the judge sitting at the bench. So it served multiple purposes. So this new room will be fully accessible. There'll be ramps on the sides to provide access to the elevated area behind the dais, all, sound systems, screens and so on. It just gives you a sense of the scale of the room. Next, please. And then at the two entrances off of Milburn Avenue, we would demolish the existing staircases, which are in terrible condition and too steep, and they're not fire resistant, and replace them with new stairs so that people coming in from the street can easily and generously rise directly to the second floor if they don't want to take the elevator. And these would also serve as the emergency stairs in the event of a fire. Next, please. So here's a cross section taking the length of the building with Essex Street over here, Milburn Avenue over here. This is the existing basement. And then these are the stairs we're talking about up from the existing building up into the additions. The addition starts here. And then this is the lobby, 2-story high. And then we've got the violations bureau here on the second floor over it. We're proposing to put a large, very large room for municipal archives. And the reason we're proposing to do that is because the DEP, because this is in a floodplain, the DEP doesn't want anything to be down here because of flooding. And right now, there's a lot of storage down there. It hasn't been able to be kept dry, so everything down here will be relocated up to here.
Basement then gonna be filled in.
Is the basement going to be filled in? Well, let me explain that. So I was speaking to our site engineers today, and what he said was the Department of Environmental Protection of the state, if they conclude that the value of the renovation is in excess of 50% of the value of the building that we're renovating, which it may be, but we don't know yet, they will insist upon it being filled in. But this is a decision that will come down the road, but it's going to be a calculation that we'll have to do when we get to that point.
Better to fill it in to flood in, or is it better to be unfilled?
Well, there are issues both ways. If we fill it in, then we have to use materials that won't overload the walls and so on, because it was never designed for that. If we don't fill it in, then we have to be prepared to pump it out, because it may very well fill with water under certain circumstances.
I'll just jump in there
Yeah.
too, because I think there's also what is on paper and what has actually happened. And so certainly Eli and the DP, everybody they look at what happened, what is on paper. That is not sort of what happens here. When we talk about flooding in the basement, we're talking about getting, much like in your own home, your sump pump stops working, you get a couple inches in your basement. That's happened in our records area a few times. We've since replaced the sump pump. And then one time we had a broken window in which water came into the window in one of the storage areas, but it is not like an inundation of the basement. And so it's just this sort of battle between like what they see on paper and what actually happens in real life.
Quick question maybe for you, Alex. Do the archives need to be here on site?
So we have a lot of archives stored offsite.
You do already?
Yeah, the file bank. And we keep what we need access to here. Otherwise, like, we pay for them to be offsite, and then you also then pay for them to come back. And so whatever we need access to quickly, we keep here.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. So this is just showing, for instance, in this second story archives room, you could fit a lot of storage. And if it turns out that this wasn't enough, you could also get what we call movable storage. I don't know if you've seen those cabinets that move on wheels so that you can get it even tighter. So there's going to be a lot of capacity there for the future. Next, please. So this is a little hard to see, but this is showing the preliminary layout from our mechanical engineers of all the new rooftop equipment. And the idea here is to use all electric. There's a big move toward electrification in order to not continue to burn fossil fuels. And so that's sort of the direction we're looking at. Next slide. So then we did a very preliminary schedule to see how long this would all take. Now, there were two potential sort of ways to go about doing this sort of project. One is to do it in phases where, for instance, you move everybody down to the first floor and you renovate the second, then you switch and you renovate the first. That takes a lot of time and it can be very expensive, but it avoids moving people out of the building. The other approach, which Alex, you might want to talk about, which is the direction we're going.
Yeah, so in this case, with the purchase of 22 East Willow, the idea would be to temporarily relocate Town Hall to 22 East Willow. It is set up like a classroom. It was a professional school business, so I think it could very easily be adapted to be various offices with partitions and the various classrooms and things like that. So the idea would be able to move everyone out while this construction would take place.
Would that be able to accommodate the meetings or large enough?
So I think the meetings would have to be held at the library. And I know that the library is currently working on new technologies, Zoom capabilities and things like that. So I think they're scheduled to have that completed this year. So it may all coincide this.
And they'll allow us to go beyond 45.
Excellent. All right, so I mentioned earlier about LEED. So as we were doing our work, we had several meetings with the Environmental Commission and a number of meetings with our LEED consultant, and this is what we call a LEED scorecard. It lists all the potential credits you can get. The way LEED works is that it's a rating system with 100 potential credits. And in order to get certified, you have to be between 40 and 49 credits. To be silver, you have to be 50 to 59 credits and so on. So we had to figure out which mix of credits we could get. Now, some credits you can get pretty much for free. So for instance, because LEED encourages people to use mass transit because it's more efficient than having everybody drive. If you're close to a train station or a bus terminal, you get a credit for that. It doesn't cost you anything. This is close enough to the train station, a very busy one, that you get 1 or 2 credits, which is great. But other credits, you actually have to do something, which means, for instance, you have to put in a very high efficiency HVAC system, or you have to put in really good windows, or you have to do recycled materials, so on. So we spent many hours trying to figure out which mix of credits we could actually achieve without prohibitive cost, which things we could do. Like we knew we were going to be insulating the outside walls, and we figured we were going to replace all the windows because that's part of the upgrade we want to do, so that we can reduce the size of the heating system because all these things are connected. And so after doing all that, we came up with a combination of credits that we felt we could get. And we think we can get 53 credits. We're definitely getting 53 credits, and there are 26 maybes, which is good because you always want to have a cushion, because when this gets reviewed by the agency that certifies you, sometimes they disagree with your decisions and your calculations and say, well, you thought you were going to get that credit, but we won't give it to you. So you always have to have a cushion. Next, please. And then we had a detailed cost estimate made of the project. Not just the architectural aspects, but all the mechanical, electrical, structural, technology, plumbing, so on. And then after we got the estimate, we sort of took it apart in order to help explain the major components. As you can see, the biggest piece of this, about half of the total, is for functional improvements, like the rearrangement, the gutting of the interior, the rearrangement of things. But there's almost $1.5 million of site improvements. There's $1 million worth of HVAC work. There's $800,000 worth of environmental, asbestos and lead remediation. So you see, there's a lot of stuff in here to make this all work, so that you have a building when it's all done that'll last another 50 to 100 years. And so when this was estimated last September, this was the estimate. Since then, based on current inflation costs, it's up to about 12.5 million.
Total?
That's for the building. There are also professional fees, there are testing laboratories, a lot of other things. But that's the biggest piece. And it's for what will be about 19,000 square feet, which is about what you have now. But of course, we're losing the basement and replacing it with
What
something
do you
else.
estimate the soft cost to be? This, the hardware at 12.5. You think a couple $1 million?
Yeah, probably a couple million, between furniture, furnishings, professional fees, yeah.
2 million, just.
Yeah, it could be somewhere, 2.5, something like that. All right, so that's the first part of my presentation. Now, after we did this, we were asked to do a little side study, which I now want to show you. So let's go switch to that. Before we switch, are there any questions about this? Yes,
Would the roof steel to accommodate solar panels?
yes. In fact, we've assumed that there may be solar panels on the whole new part.
Seems like if you're gonna do it, you might as well.
Correct. And you, I don't know if you know, do all of you know the Maplewood Police and Court Building down the street? You may not know it, but there's a solar array on the roof there, but you can't see it from the street.
And that, they almost like net zero their electric bill?
No, nowhere close.
Nowhere close. But
Well-
they do good. I mean, it's gotta have some benefits.
Oh, there are probably times of the day in the summer
Mhm.
when, on a momentary basis, they generate all the power they need. But net for the entire year, I think they maybe 10%, 15%. Because computers use a lot of power.
Right.
They're open 24 hours a day, the police building, so they use a lot of power. All right, so now let's go to this other study. So we were asked,
I have a question.
yeah, I'm sorry,
20,000 square feet divided by, or 15 million divided by 20,000 square feet, what's that, $750 per square foot?
Yes.
What is the average cost to build of a building such as this from scratch or new or et cetera, just to give everybody.
well, I'm about to talk about that, so
Okay.
perfect question, perfect time. So we were asked to do a separate study to look at what it would cost to build a new building. But the new building we were asked to look at was to build a new combined municipal court and police building. To basically empty the police building, move all those people into a new building with everybody from this building. And so we did a study, next slide, please. And so we were asked to figure out how compact or efficient we could make it. So we met with the police department, figured out their needs, and then we took all their needs and combined them with all the needs we determined for this building, put them all together to try to figure out how much space we needed for a combined building. And the site we were asked to plan it for was just a block over at the corner of Spring and Essex Street. And because of the soil conditions in this part of town, we did not put a basement under, so we created a 2-story building on that site. And so essentially, we've got,
Is that the Rimbeck site right now? Is that the surface light?
is that the correct term?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in this case, we put the courtroom, council room, committee room in the middle, and we have municipal offices along one side, and then we have the police department wrapping the other two. And their new firing range is in the back. Next slide, please. And on the second floor, we have the open area of the, assuming the courtroom, committee room is 2 stories high. Then we have shareable conference rooms here. And then we have the second story of the municipal offices here. And then we have the second story of the police department wrapping around. Each floor is, I think, about 20,000 square feet. We'll get to the numbers in just a second. Next slide, please. And then on the top, we still have to provide these archives because we weren't providing a basement under. So we created an archives room, basically on the roof, under the roof, so to speak. Next. Now, the biggest issue here that we came across was that when you add up all the vehicles that the police have, or not only that the official vehicles, but the staff vehicles, especially during shift changes, and then you add all the municipal staff, because they're going to need parking in this place too, and the violation staff, you get up to 125 spaces just for the staff and official vehicles. That doesn't count any visitors whatsoever. That's a lot of cars. And so during meetings, you can meet up to another 100 vehicles for visitors. If you had a big active committee. All right, next slide. And so here's an expanded version of the site plan you saw earlier. Here's the town hall and the alarm building. Here's Essex Street. And so this is the footprint of this combined building. And the entrance would be on Essex. And in this configuration where if the property was limited to the current town property, which is this, you can get 75 spaces between a few off of Spring Street, a few in here, and then a bunch here and here. That's 75, but you need 125. Next slide. The only way you're going to get at least 125 is if the town were to buy the entire southwest corner of the block. Then you can get 131 spaces on the block. Of course, if you bought it here, if you bought this, you could also move the building to a different part of the site, like along Milburn Avenue instead of along Essex Street. The point being that unless you own the whole block, you can't get enough spaces there for all the people you need to run the building and occupy the building. Next. And so then we tried to summarize the comparison between renovating and building new. So this is going to take a few minutes to explain. So the existing building has a basement, first and second floor. That's the building we're in. Basement at 5,000, the first floor is about 7, and the second floor is about 7. Under our plan of renovation, I'm sorry, and the existing police building has 10,000 each on each of 2 stories. So the existing town hall has about under 19,000, and the existing police department has 20,000. And so you add them up, the total existing buildings is about almost 40,000 square feet, okay? Scenario 1 is to renovate town hall. And that means abandoning the basement, that's why this has nothing in it, keeping the 2 upper floors, and then adding to the building. And so the total in the expanded building would be 20,170. And we'd keep so one scenario is to renovate this building, do nothing at the police building, at least as part of this project. You end up with 40,000, which isn't really very much different from this. And you end up spending the renovation cost, this is just construction, and nothing in the police building, you come up with about 12.5 million. The next scenario is to build a new town hall, just a town hall, like do part of the building that we just showed you the picture of, but not put the police building in, police department in. So you leave the existing police and you create a new town hall alone, and that's about 15 million. So there's the answer to the question that was asked earlier. And then that's what we come up with. And then this third scenario is the one that where you build a new police and municipal building. And that comes up to about 29 million. So that's the comparison of those strategies.
And if you did that, what happens to this building?
That's
Alex?
right. Ask Alex.
And is there's not gonna be, in the renovation, there's not gonna be a firing range that's currently in there, it's filled in, or what's going on with that right
Oh, the range that's underneath this building has been abandoned for 50 years. The range that the police have is in their building. They have currently have a range, but they're not using it for that purpose. There's a whole another issue, but there was a range built in the police building when it was built.
It's base issue. So, can I just add?
Sure. If there are any questions.
So just by way of some additional information is that I think that this exercise, again, was valuable for a lot of reasons, obviously as options, but also to understand a little bit more about what the police department needs. I think the idea of square footage, parking spaces and things like that are transferable to whatever, site may be. I think that certainly we're looking at lot 19, but if there was some other site available, we kind of get a sense of what we need and what would be needed in that combined scenario in terms of square footage and parking. To answer the question about the range, I mean, I think this also speaks to a little bit about the police department in terms of their needs and space constraints currently. One of the original first ideas was to bring the court over to this building because that clears the entire courtroom, the violations offices, creates a lot of space in the police department for potential usage, and that may be able to give them the opportunity to shift things from where the firing range is currently in the basement. But there's a lot of constraints on firing ranges too, obviously, from a environmental standpoint, noise standpoint, things like that. Currently, just for background, our police department doesn't have the ability to qualify or train in town. They have to do that elsewhere, you know, whether it's Livingston, Maplewood, they go to things like that. But I think going through this exercise certainly helped us get more information from the police department on things that they currently may not have that they may need, or whether they need different sizes and the types of offices and rooms and things that they have. The police department is currently going through a small renovation project where the dispatch area used to be and where the lieutenant sits, as well as where the officers write reports when they're writing reports in the building. And so again, this was something that we were looking at, and I think that's something that's transferable to wherever that may be. So.
Isn't it the case though that, you know, we have the 12, the 15 and the 28, but if we move this building or both buildings to a brand new site, then the existing building would be then theoretically something with a market value that we could sell that property.
That's correct.
So it's not necessarily $3 million more, leaving the police department out of it. So it's not necessarily 12 to 15, it's $3 million more, because if you sold this building for, you know, something that would reduce to 15, could end up being cheaper than 12.
Sure. And I think the other thing to keep in mind too is that what's not calculated into a renovation of town hall is the savings on heating and cooling costs and things like that. So, you know, there's other things that certainly factor into this on all of the scenarios. So, yes.
This building, is this weighted down with a historical preservation designation? Is town hall historical?
It is not designated historical, but it is on the historic element of the master plan.
And what does that mean?
It just means it's on the plan. So it has the potential to be designated.
We can't tear this thing down, right? Can we tear this down?
I think that it would have to be a decision that's made, whether you're going to, if you were going to sell this property, then.
So to Mike's point,
Yeah.
Can you sell this property, or I think we should understand that. It's a critical thing to understand.
I agree. I think it also goes to some of that is also the HBC, right? Do they think that this is something that should be preserved or not, or the community as a whole?
Did you have any input with the HBC?
Good.
This building is
Yes,
in-
one of my staff members spoke to your historic consultant, and as I mentioned earlier, he asked for certain key elements like the hose tower, which is here.
That was presuming we were keeping this.
Correct.
No,
I think.
but I think the question is, if we weren't keeping this, then
Yeah.
what are we able to do with this building?
Yeah, remember
So can it be demolished?
that the original task was renovating this building, and so that is a question that needs to be answered, because you know, the whole idea was preserving the building. And then, you know, I think Eli was talking about the hose tower because that was something that could potentially be removed in the scenario, but it is something that the HPC asked to be
If
kept.
you're gonna keep it, that makes sense, if that, you know, but if you're gonna move it elsewhere, the question is, would it be the case that you have to keep the whole building, or, could it be sold and repurposed? The land
Can I just
repurposed?
ask, I'm sorry, what is the hose tower?
This portion right here,
And it was used as a
Yeah.
firehouse.
when it was used as a firehouse.
So do you see this from the outside? Do you see that from the street?
Yes,
It just looks like a brick bump.
That's what
yes.
What's so special about it?
It's part of the original building.
Yeah.
Part of the original building.
Yeah.
Is there a pole?
Is there a wall?
No, a pole.
A pole?
Fire-
No.
No.
Like-
But there is actually an old peephole from when when there used to be cells downstairs for the police department.
I know that's like a rec farm. Just like go through like an option A and option B, option A is renovation of this. You said that like the hard cost is like 12.5, now soft is like another 22.5. We lose the food pantry.
No,
Right.
actually, I just pointed
There's
out.
No, because I didn't mention it, it seemed like.
No, the food pantry is part of the project.
Because it wasn't mentioned, and
Yeah,
that's,
I'm sorry.
I know there's someone here that has an interest in that.
There-
We also-
there's a space in
I
the
know, but It
renovation.
wasn't mentioned, it was saying. that-
Well, we didn't mention every single room, but
Right,
there's a
I know
mechanical
that
room,
when you
there's
say
a
that
food
the
pantry.
roof
Yeah.
Building you were taking down,
Yeah, we put the food pantry in.
all right, so that, now, if you go to option B, what would you think the soft cost would be for the $29 million project? And if we had acquired the other the other pieces to get the parking, how much would that be, Ed? Was that included in the 29?
Well,
Remember?
no, because,
It might not be viable.
Right.
Site might be for something else, and we don't know that until later. So
right, I think, again, it was an exercise to be able to understand what was needed. Whether that lives there or somewhere else, or it's just a matter of how much square footage are you potentially gonna need and how much parking are you gonna need?
And
Well,
need to
well-
acquire property.
And do you need to acquire?
Well, just, I know in multiple houses, the house I built in Florida, it was cheaper to knock down the old house, just build a new house on top of it. Can we do that here and take that cost down from $750 per square foot hard and soft cost? Can we cut that in half? I don't know how, $750 square foot, I don't know if that's even good or not, I mean, but is that possible?
You're gonna be at 22 East Willow.
Right, so you have the optionality, right? Is that possible, and what would that cost look like?
Well, that's,
It's gotta be cheaper to build from fresh than it does to rehab.
that's the
no,
scenario,
not true.
Okay, explain that, Eli, that's important.
Okay, no, that's a whole new.
That's a whole new
combined-
thing.
That's a combined lease
Let-
and-
let's explain.
It's just-
So let me explain. So you can see it right here. So
Right.
the cost of renovation, we estimate for, now, of course, the cost of renovation is very specific to the building because we're renovating, we're not just gutting the interior and moving partitions, but the exterior walls are not insulated, so we're ripping off, we're cutting open every wall and putting in all new insulation. And we're putting in all new windows, but you're still getting the benefit of the fact that we're keeping the foundations and we're keeping the superstructure. So that's why the cost per square foot, even with all that work, is still less than a new building. Not a huge amount less, but still less. So new construction, and this number sounds crazy, but this is what we're seeing everywhere. And we've just finished I was just this morning, a new building down on Long Beach Island, new municipal building. Just finished a municipal building in Colts Neck. We did a plan last year for a new building in Caldwell. This is the going rate for new construction of municipal and police buildings.
Sure, why
What
not?
was the cost per square foot for the one you did in Maplewood?
Well, that was finished now 16 years ago.
Oh, it says 6 years.
Yeah, and at that time it was 450.
10, inflation.
Yeah, well, yeah, right.
Fine.
And Alex, so it's not like you're taking out a mortgage, this town has the money, right? So you're not talking about like mortgage costs. So how about one more thing, so let's suppose you do this gut, which is, I mean, it just has to be done, it's brilliant, and don't put benches back for chairs. But how about if you use that space to give the police and fire, I mean, the fire station's in terrible condition, let them get something new, right? Not necessarily combining it. You know, have space to all three together, and then nothing's gonna get done.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we can talk that there's a need in a variety of locations when it comes to municipal buildings. And at some point, you know, we we have to make a decision long term of what is going to be done, not only with this building, but certainly those other buildings that exist in town. But as you can see, this has been a slog to get to even this point. And I imagine very similar constraints and concerns and questions will be brought up with any building that we propose. But most of that is going to be, you know, where is it going to go? I think is one thing, and certainly the cost. But I think Eli would agree with this, and but the longer we wait, the more expensive it's going to get. With any of these, with whatever option is chosen, whatever people decide to do, it's just going to continue to get more expensive.
Let's suppose this TC votes for this. How long would it take to move everyone to 22 East Willow and get this started? Because these guys here vote for this, there's 4 of you here. If
But we're not talking about their decisions.
No, I'm just saying, no, I'm saying if, how long would it take?
You had a
Yeah,
choice.
yeah, go ahead. I mean, because
Is it something about we would be taking on more, and we would be fine.
of course,
It's
yeah.
not the same thing as the more.
It's not like 7 mortgage.
No, we're using the full faith and credit of the township, I would think, right?
Right.
What is the interest rate now on the mortgage?
3% for a muni.
No, but what is it on a mortgage?
Oh,
So you're not
7
taking a
and-
mortgage.
7.5%.
It's not like it's like 12 months sitting in the bank to pay for it, you know.
You get an arbitrage on the bond.
But it's kind of bond.
Okay, so
Okay, so to answer your question,
if
is
you had to move the people and start this project,
if I would say allow for about 2 years, because it's gonna, yeah, because it's gonna take another 6 months to do all the construction drawings, bid the project, get all the environmental permits. Those are the longest. Those could actually push the whole thing out because the state is so slow in approving things. And then you probably figure a year and a half of construction. So 2 years, 2.25, something like that. Until you're back in here.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Would the staff be moving like per floor? Like, would you be renovating like first floor, second, the whole?
The whole building will be empty because
So
that,
everyone would fit there?
Good.
Everyone would mostly fit there. I think that the other thing to consider, and I don't know in terms of phasing and things like that, is whether you're able to do the addition at some point as well that you could potentially move people into. But also there's other ways to combat that. I mean, I think you can have those that may be able to, and there's not a lot of people that I would to do it.
Well, there's also a lot of vacant office space. in
That is
town.
also an option.
Rent out some of
Yeah.
that. That might be more suitable than these retrofitting these club. I don't know.
Well, East Willow, to me, doesn't need a whole lot of retrofitting. I mean, it's basically I mean, yes, it's old, it's like a 50s, 60s classroom style building. But you throw up partitions, you throw up some counters, you know, it's a little bit of work when it comes to putting furniture in there. And I did ask the owner to leave a lot of furniture there too, so that we didn't have to move as much. But also if we can get to a point where the staff or the majority of the staff can move there, and certainly more of the critical nature, like in and out people, tax collector, building department, clerk's office, things like that can move there. And we can have others work remotely or, you know, shuffle in and out and not have to also rent office space. Like, we'd have to work that out, but I think you can get to a point where we can all work in it. We might have to work a little closer.
And the electrical system there is sufficient, because it has been a classroom, not really all that occupied, and, and now you have, over 100 people on their computers all the time or whatever else they're doing.
Yeah.
The electrical system supported, or does that need an upgrade?
Well, that will have to be evaluated based on the usage, but I would say that generally speaking, yes. When we evaluated the building down there, there was very little old boiler, things like that, but like very little that needed to be done. It does need a sprinkler repair, because it already has sprinklers in the building, but I think at this point, we are looking at about $11,000 in repairs to that building. There will be some other work for sure. I don't wanna portray it as like it's not gonna be highly expensive.
Classrooms?
No, it's multiple different classrooms and some are very big, some are smaller. And then there's a second floor below that also has the exact same structure, where it has multiple different classrooms.
Just, there was a question asked before about sort of the phasing. So the way we envision this, if you were to do the renovation, is that there'd be two sort of tracks going simultaneously. The existing building, once everybody's out of here, the existing building needs to be environmentally remediated. So all the asbestos and lead, getting it out of here is going to take several months. And then the outside needs to be insulated and the roof needs to be replaced. So all of that envelope work would happen at the same time that the foundations and the structure of the addition would be built. And then after 6 or 8 months, both this building and that new part would be completely enclosed and ready to go. And then all the interior work would be done in the entire building.
So is it faster if you were to move to East Willow and not knock this down? Would it be faster to rebuild or the same?
Not very different.
Not
Let's put
very
it
good.
Do you have pictures of what the east side, are you gonna change the east side view, like?
I don't have any pictures here of that.
I think if you were.
No, it's gonna be, I would imagine it's just gonna be similar, like we're keeping that entrance on
Yeah.
the Dunkin' Donuts side. And then the building will continue and have windows on it. Because it's not gonna have the courtroom on that side.
Right, because it's just gonna be a straight wall. We're just gonna continue the straight wall of the existing building all the way.
And if you come up and look at this, you can see like where the
I'm
windows
just
are.
trying to think, I was just wondering if you were changing the facade on the front.
Keeping the facade, all the existing facades are just gonna get new windows in the style of the original windows.
Are we gonna outgrow this in how many years or not?
So,
I know it's in that,
yeah,
tough question.
I mean, the thing is that a lot of things are, I think government is also gonna start shifting a little bit more toward, being able to do things, some of it remotely, some of it's gonna be done by computers, quite honestly. I don't think staffing is always, it's necessarily, specifically in town hall, is always gonna be like, it has to be a person. I don't know that we're quite there yet, but and I don't know whether we have to end up being a little bit more flexible in our policies about, work from home and remote working. In particular, like, I have a finance officer that comes here every day and works here every day, but generally you see his computer doing finance stuff, right? So all of that, will be factored in. I think there are some, future staffing needs that we'll need, but as you'll see, a lot of these square footages are going up in terms of the space for particular departments. And rather than working in individual offices, which we've done here because that's just how it's built and structured, is that you're creating spaces. So, you're gonna have more like a cubicle type of atmosphere than, everybody gets an individual office. So that allows for growth as well.
Do you need metal detectors for the court?
You do,
So that's part of it.
yeah,
When
in
you come
the
in, like-
lobby there. Everyone will have
Like
to
you
be
come
screened.
up with the entrance, 'cause I know like in other municipalities, to get into the courtroom, you have to come through a special door and go through a metal detector before you even get
All
into.
kinds of.
Yes, the administrative office of the courts has very strict
I know.
procedures. You had a question?
Two questions. If you were to go the scenario with whole new building, including police department, what would happen to the police department across the road? And would that space be available for additional parking? Has that been taken into account?
The answer is, it could be used for that purpose, but I have no idea what the thoughts are as to what.
And my second question, as part of the lead designation, are not there categories for reusing of existing buildings, the debt and
Embodied,
of energy
yes,
that you save by reusing?
right, their credits, it's all part of the equation. Right, that's correct. Reusing an existing building is much more energy efficient than building from scratch.
Yeah. Will there be an analysis of the return on investment of this build? Obviously, it's not self-funding, just understanding any economic impacts that may exist, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, because $15 million, even at 3%, that's a couple $400,000 a month in spending. What are the returns on building the new building, et cetera? I think that should be done so people can understand what those benefits are. I'm sure they're great, et cetera.
Don't have the same type of return on investment with municipal buildings as you would.
I'm asking Alex, thank you. So something like that, so just understand what that is. If the answer is, as this gentleman here said, maybe we just have that statement ready to go as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think there's, obviously there's value in keeping town hall, close to the downtown. I mean, all of us, I mean, I don't even wanna let people know what I spend at Salad House, but, you have everybody that works here that certainly patronizes, the downtown businesses and things like that. That's part of it. But,
Fantastic, yeah.
So, and obviously any of this construction is gonna create jobs, as well, in that. So, we could take a look at that and figure out if there's anything there. But yeah, it is certainly a much more difficult scenario when it comes to municipal buildings. We're not bringing rent in, and we're not, which is also the difficulty in proposing projects like this, because, it's hard for people to see the value in, the renovation of municipal buildings, which is why a lot of times municipal buildings are left, to age, and towns don't necessarily invest heavily in their infrastructure when it comes to buildings, because we're the ones using them. The public does come in here at times when they need to, but it's not something that. But certainly, I mean, I've heard all of the complaints over the years about this building, whether it's the seams in the carpet or the pews or the beautiful wallpaper in that hallway out there, or the inaccessibility of the bathrooms, or the plastic bag on the urinal in the men's bathroom, or
Plastic
you know,
bags on
what-
the windows. Do you have plastic on
we
your
have plastic on
windows?
our windows,
Right.
things like that. So like, yeah, it's time.
But Alex, I don't agree with you, because all of the towns I drive around, they have new municipal buildings. They have renovated them, they've upgraded them. You're in the process of doing that for.
Eli's got a
multiple
long
towns.
list, yeah.
Yeah,
He's
so I
working on it.
can't really agree, and we agree all the time, but I don't agree that these buildings are left to squalor.
Well-
Summit, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
New Providence.
what I'm saying
Yeah,
is
no,
that
I'm-
we are at the point where we need to be that town now.
Yes.
We have gone as far as we can, and also what happens is that if you're thinking about something like this, then you stop investing.
Right.
Because you're gonna do something like this. And so I think it is, we're kind of at that critical juncture of making a decision of what we're gonna do, because or we need to start reinvesting back, into the building. If we're gonna stay here and nothing's gonna happen, we need to know that. Because we do have HVAC, and I think that one of the things that's not included in this that also needs to be, is there some exterior work that does need to be done? I'm thinking, in terms of the older part of this building, you'd probably want to reseal the bricks.
Yeah,
You'd want to do some of the overhangs out here need to be, fixed up, but that's minor stuff.
But we allowed a little bit for the roof edges, and all the windows will be replaced. And we did look at the condition of the brick on the outside, and most of the building does not need to be repaired. It's held up very well.
That's
And if you have a lot of extra rooms, like when Jamie's doing stuff with senior citizens, if they can't go to the Bauer Center, there's no parking there.
Mhm.
So they would have access to more spaces in this building, so.
Correct. And I was gonna ask you, there's a contingency in the cost estimates
Yes.
as well, right? For all of them? Or just for the renovation? For-
And so I should also point out that there may be some funding, not huge funding, but community development block grants have been available for decades for accessibility improvements.
Mhm.
And we've gotten lots of money from other towns to replace elevators, replace bathrooms and so on. So this building, this project, if you go ahead with it, not new construction, but renovation, there's money for that sort of stuff.
Any other questions? Do we have any legitimate questions on that?
You're taking away the employees' picnic tables.
Well, we still,
Yeah, no, because I was thinking, because that's where you're looking at it, it's to the left.
the new picnic table location will be right
I'm looking at the.
in the courtyard here.
Anything else? There's only one attendee. Is there any questions from the attendees on Zoom?
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand. There we go.
Thank you for your time.
We got one more.
Oh, one more question. Oh,
Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, thank you for doing this. Very interesting. I would recommend that you do something like it or some version of it at a township committee meeting. I'm assuming the recording will be available to all. But I think more people will need to see it. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, we'll get all this up tomorrow. The presentation as well as the recording. With that, we'll end up, but we'll stick around if anybody has any other questions.
Overwatch best.
We can end this.